Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. The large-headed thing. When I was about 14, my mother and I moved back into my old childhood home that we had rented out for 4 years while we dealt with family stuff in another state. So bear in mind, we had never felt any negative presence or entities, spirits while living there for years beforehand. Our renters would call us every now and then and say that their plates would fly out of the open cabinets and shatter across the room. It kind of sounded ridiculous to us, and we couldn't really do anything, so we pretty much just ignored them. And we thought that maybe they were just imagining things because we'd never really experienced anything there like that. So, fast forward a couple of years, and we moved back into the house. And there were tons of boxes just laying around from our move. I didn't work when I was 14, so that summer I was in the house a lot while my mom was at work. I would often hear boxes being kind of shuffled around in my mom's room, and I wondered what that was. My room is downstairs, and hers was directly above me upstairs. I kind of ignored it, and I didn't really want to mess with whatever was happening up there, so I didn't say anything. A couple of months later, my oldest sister moved back home with us, and she stayed in our guest room upstairs, next to our mom's room. She worked late hours and so would be awake watching TV while my mom and I were asleep. One night she said she heard the boxes being moved around, and it was so loud in my mom's room that she went to go ask my mom to stop unpacking because it was bothering her. And when she opened the door to my mom's room, the noise stopped, and she saw my mom was asleep in her bed. She freaked out and told my mom in the morning, where I admitted to hearing the boxes too. So about a week later, my mom came home to her room and saw that the clothes had been taken out of her moving boxes, folded, and put in between the boxes. That one still really puzzles us. This whole encounter was kind of spread out over like 8 months or something like that, so things slowly started to escalate, it seemed. One night, I was downstairs in my room and I heard a woman crying in our living room. I thought it was my mom, and so I went to go and check on her. I got to the living room and I switched on the lights, and the crying just stopped, and there was nobody there. Around the same time, my mother claimed she heard a small child yelling, "Mama," from the bottom of the stairs, and when she went to check, there was no one and nothing there. And our two dogs were just freaking out at the top of the stairs, but wouldn't go down either. One night, I was sleeping in my room and I woke up, and there was this feeling like I was being pinched and something very heavy on my whole body. No matter what I did, I felt like I just couldn't move. When I was able to finally get up, I ran up to my mother's room and I started sleeping in her room every night from then on. There was also an unexplained bruise when I woke up that morning, and I thought it was from the pinch, but I think I was just freaking myself out and I got the bruise from somewhere else. I don't know. Our back kitchen doors are glass, so when you're walking into the kitchen, you can see behind you if you're looking at the glass doors. So then one night, my mom walked into the kitchen and she saw a man behind her in the reflection walking out of our bathroom and to our stairs, and then he disappeared. The worst night was when I woke up in the dark in Mom's room and I saw a very distinct figure in the corner of the room. It was covered in black clothing head to toe, and it didn't move. I stared for a pretty long time because the head on this figure seemed so distorted and it was almost like a balloon. It was so big. I was actually frozen with fear, and I just turned back over until I fell asleep. I guess this was, almost like a way of escaping the fear. I just suddenly felt very tired and just fell asleep. I told my mom in the morning what I saw. and this was the breaking point for us. It seemed like my mom and I were experiencing both very different things, but we found out the reason for this after digging into the history of our old New England house. It turns out that in the early 1900s, a woman named Mary had bought our house for $1 and lived in it with her and a child. According to an old census, the child had died 1 year, but we couldn't track down any more information about the child. Turns out there was an old guy down the street who was actually alive while Mary lived in our house. He used to try and sell berries to her, but he said she would never buy and always wore head to toe black and seemed angry most of the time. My mom and I figured that this was after her daughter had passed away and that she was just mad at the world, and depressed. We also found out that she had two husbands previously, one divorced and the other one had passed away. We did some more digging and we found out that she was actually eventually committed to the old Danvers State Hospital, possibly for some, so-called hysteria, sexist kind of reason, or maybe for depression or just something that, a lot of people have now and that back then they had no tolerance for, especially in women. We never figured out the reason anyway. Eventually, she did end up dying of a botched lobotomy at the state hospital, and the hospital tried to claim that it was a heart attack or something that went wrong with her heart. After the family went to claim her body, they saw how horribly distorted her head was, and they just went after the hospital and sued them. We found her burial place in a cemetery in town, and we brought flowers for her. All of this information was helpful, but we still have this paranormal experience in the house. We consulted a local medium eventually who helped with sage, and she talks to spirits and cleanse the rooms. When the medium got to my mom's room, the room that both me, her, and our two dogs were seeking refuge in for the past couple of months, she said that this room had the most negative energy. I never believed in anything paranormal before this, but the medium's ritual really did make the whole house feel just kind of lighter. It's like this weight was lifted, this dark cloud or something. It was very palpable. The medium figured that because I was the daughter figure in the house, the mom attached to me, and I only saw and heard the mom. And because my mom was the mother figure, the young daughter attached to my mom. The medium claimed that she saw Mary and her daughter holding hands, walking towards the light after the cleansing. Afterwards, we planted a rose bush in our backyard in memory of Mary and her time here on earth and in our home. Acknowledging her and her pain was so important in moving on. The medium also asked about any renovations in the house, as that can stir up paranormal activity apparently that has laid dormant for years, and suddenly it all clicked. While we had renters in our house, we paid to renovate our bathroom. The guy called and said he found an old door in our bathroom, meaning that our bathroom used to be an old side entrance into the house, and he asked if he could rip it out. We said yes. Shortly after that renovation was when the renters called us about the flying plates and so on. While we never experienced something as harmful as flying plates, we partially attribute that to the renters' family's negative energy. They had a large, semi-hoarding family with one daughter who was a meth addict and 3 kids that were all born addicted to meth. Something I forgot to include as well was background info on the guy my mom saw in the house. Some digging into the house's history found that the house used to be a brothel in the 1800s, and the man using an old side entrance seemed to fit that narrative. It also used to be a summer camp with a pool in the 1950s, which isn't necessary to include, but I thought that was kind of interesting too. So 7 years later, and we just don't feel anything in the home now. Granted, I don't live there full time anymore. I'm thankful we enlisted the help of the medium because it was important to make us feel safe in our home again, but to also acknowledge the presence of those who lived there before us and to help them to move on. and have some kind of closure and just let go of this life and get ready for their next one, wherever that's going to be for them. That is such a heartwarming story towards the end. It's just really nice that it ended like that, and that these two souls, the mother and child, were able to just move on into their new life on the other side and let go, of all the pain and suffering and, that was holding them here in this life. So that was really nice. Nice ending. The Top of the Hill. In 2008, I was visiting California. A group of friends and I decided to check out this haunted trail in California. The trail itself was a cement slab climbing up a hill. At the top, to the left, was this water tower, and to the right, there was an opening to a pitch black circle of trees. We all just sort of trekked into the circle of trees silently, and after about 5 minutes or so, Girl D runs out screaming and crying hysterically. We all just followed her out, and she's already running full speed down the hill to get out of there. Then Girl S starts crying and says she just saw a transparent woman in a white dress sitting on a rock near the water tower. So she just freaked out too and just started running down after everyone. Friend A and I kind of stayed back and thinking, they got spooked and for no reason, it seemed kind of silly why they were just kind of tearing off like that. And then halfway down the trail, I turned around and I saw what I can only describe as two black smoke-like shapes. They were sort of like oily sort of water consistency, and they were floating down the hill right behind us. The shapes were both different sizes. Friend A turned around and confirmed that she saw it too. Being young, dumb, and interested in the occult, we thought that this was wild, but actually at that point we weren't really afraid. At the bottom of the hill, we saw the shapes almost down the halfway point. So these things were actually moving through the air, and it was like they were partly following us or something. Then friend D refuses to talk the whole ride. She just cried. It took her about 3 days to come clean with what she saw, and after that she even refused to hang out with us again. So apparently in the circle of trees, she had seen a little boy who looked happy. Then his smile faded, and he was afraid as this black kind of mass came in between them. She said she felt dread, couldn't talk, couldn't breathe, and couldn't move until her boyfriend severed the connection by unknowingly crossing in between her and the black mass. She had weird things happen at her house for weeks after that. There were noises, things being moved around, you name it. Friend A's mom is a self-professed clairvoyant who follows Native American witchery. She says we brought something terrible into her home. We have to go back and clean the air. So a few of us go back with her mom, and as we're in the circle of trees, she says the spirits of many children are trapped there. She says, I'm going to release them. Please be still. And all of a sudden, it sounded like hundreds of little feet crunching leaves, running around all over the place around us. We didn't have any issues after that, and I have not gone back to that place. I want to say I believe in the afterlife, but I'm still not sure. I just know what I saw and heard, and it was bizarre, and I can't really explain it. The skull face. This happened to me years ago, and to be honest, I still feel sick talking about it. I don't think of myself as normally a believer in the paranormal, and that's mostly my husband's thing, but this kind of changed things for me. Anyway, we were moving to a new state, and I was out looking at rental homes with my baby. I had 4 to 5 homes to view, and this one was my last stop. The owner had a lockbox on the door, so I was just supposed to get the key out, open up, take my time looking around, lock up, and put the key back in the box. Now, 98% of the time, when I walk around an empty house, or heck, even a furnished home, I can mentally picture my furnishings and belongings in there. I'd hang this picture on that wall, or I'd put the sofa in the corner, etc. But as I'm walking around this absolutely charming old farmhouse with lots of windows and built ins, right up my alley, I'm having a complete mental block. I can't even decide which child should have which room, which is usually my first thought. My baby fell asleep before we got to the house, so I'm carrying her in her car seat. I go back downstairs and I'm standing in the kitchen, just trying to picture my stuff there. It's annoying me that, I'm just drawing a complete blank. I don't even know if I want to rent the house or not, something I can generally tell in less than 5 minutes when I look at places. So I walk to the middle of the kitchen. I'm just standing there a second trying to decide what to do. And this, again, is completely unlike me. I'm generally a very decisive person. All of a sudden, I felt this presence over my right shoulder. Menacing doesn't even come anywhere near to the mark. Rage, malice, just pure freaking evil is what this thing felt like. And in my mind, I have this creepy image of a skull with sort of tightly covered skin over it and with long, stringy white hair down the back. It wants me out of the house right now. I know this for a fact. I don't actually hear any words out loud, but in my mind, this scary voice just screams at me to get out now. All this happens in less than a second, and in the very next second, my normally sweet tempered, docile, happy baby, who almost never cries, she wakes up out of a dead sleep, looks exactly at the point over my right shoulder where I felt the presence, and screams bloody murder like she's never screamed before. As I type this, the hairs on my skin are just standing on end, just remembering how I felt. I don't think I've ever moved so fast in all my life. I just bolted. I slammed the door, threw the keys on the porch. I raced to the car, pretty much just chucked my baby's car seat inside. I do distinctly remember hearing that click, and I just drove off like a bat out of hell. Later, when I told my husband what happened, he insisted on seeing the house for himself. I honestly don't know why. No force on heaven or earth could have compelled me to ever set foot inside that place again. I don't care how cheap the rent was. So I drove him out there with the half-hearted intention of having him put the key back in the lockbox because I was actually feeling a bit guilty for just tossing it on the porch near the door during my frantic flight. As we got closer and closer to the house, my body was hunching down into itself like a turtle hiding in its shell, something I didn't even realize I was doing until my husband pointed it out. We pull in the driveway, and what appeared in the daylight to be this pretty welcoming farmhouse before now looks completely menacing to me. Not really surprising, but I remember feeling taken aback at how hateful it looked to me right now. It's like it really didn't want me there. My big, burly, macho husband gets out to go out and put the key back and takes about 3 steps from the car, literally, I'm not kidding, and then comes racing back and yells at me to drive away as soon as possible. It's a while before either of us can speak rationally about this, but he finally tells me that something in there screamed at him to get out. This is not a dude who frightens easily, by the way. This was seriously one of the scariest moments of my life. I would have chalked the whole thing up to nerves, even though I'm not that kind of girl, if it hadn't been for my baby's reaction. For her to suddenly open her eyes like that from a deep sleep and focus exactly where I felt the presence, and for that reaction from her, it was like she was in sheer terror. And especially considering she had never before and has never since behaved that way. Horrifying doesn't even come close to describing it. Whatever's in there is pure evil. That was my experience of it. That was the energy that I felt coming from this thing. Wow. Well, actually, it was a blessing in disguise that you actually did experience that thing right away, because can you imagine if you had actually moved in with your family and then this had happened, and you just would have wasted rent money and you'd be stuck there perhaps until you could find something else. I don't know. Or maybe this thing could have hurt your baby. I mean, it doesn't even bear thinking about. Really scary indeed.